Well, let's just jump right into it. This is basically the second year in a row that the Trump administration has considered issuing a rescission package. Can you just set the scene for us, walk us through how this has unfolded? There's been a lot of events throughout the whole year, really, so maybe just lay the groundwork for us.
Yes, there's a lot of groundwork to lay. And yeah, thanks everyone so much for joining, and obviously a very pertinent and timely topic to be discussing here. So I think it is helpful to give a little bit of context to what we've seen over the last several weeks. And that context really starts with the beginning of the Trump administration. I mean, starting in 2017, we began to see these budget proposals from the White House calling for significant cuts to U.S. foreign aid, somewhere in the ballpark of 30% of the foreign aid budget. And we've seen those every year, starting with the first year of the administration. And every year we've seen the U.S. Congress reject those requests, those proposals, and keep foreign aid funding relatively flat during this administration. And it's the U.S. Congress that ultimately holds sway over the U.S. budget process. So they have the final decision on these things. That's been obviously frustrating to the Trump administration. They have a vision for what the budget should be, and foreign aid is not as big a part of that as it has been. So last summer, the administration's budget director, Mick Mulvaney, who's particularly keen on cutting foreign aid, seemed to be very fed up and frustrated with being unable to make those cuts through the budget process itself, and tried to find a workaround. And so that's where we ended up in this situation with the rescission. And let me just very quickly sort of give a 2-minute briefer on what the rescission is, how it works. So the White House, as granted authority in a law that came out in 1974, can submit a rescission proposal to Congress for a certain pool of funding. That funding is then essentially frozen for 45 days, during which Congress can either vote to support or reject that proposal. If they don't support the proposal, then the money is unfrozen and can be spent again. So, if Congress does nothing, then the money goes back and the agencies can spend it. But the particularly tricky thing that's happened over the last 2 years is that these rescission proposals, or at least what we've expected to happen, is that these rescission proposals would come out very close to the end of the fiscal year. So that 45-day freeze lands, and then there's less than 45 days until the fiscal year ends, and a bunch of this money expires anyway. So it's been unclear sort of what options are available to counter an attempted rescission very close to the end of the fiscal year. And that was seen by many as a pretty intentional attempt by the White House to circumvent Congress's budget authority. So that's sort of the broad context. And I'm happy to go into more about what specifically we saw this year, if that would be helpful.